I've never seen an empty greenhouse in 14 years. It's the first time anything like this has happened, and it's depressing.
This is something that will, you don't just lose a bit of money here, this is something that can ruin a business.
In our homes, our businesses, our places of work, this cost of living crisis is now a reality, forcing families to trade hunger for warmth, paralysing businesses. But how did it come to this?
This shouldn't look like this, should it?
No, this should be full of plants, it should be full of cucumber plants. The grower prepared it in February in the hope that the gas price would come down. It didn't, so it's laying as it is.
It's time to stop, pause and rewind. From the foods we eat to the products we consume and the services we rely on, let's trace this back down supply chains, through the economy, to where it began. And that means going to the very beginning, to ground zero. Let's begin with one of life's staples.
Have you ever wondered where salt comes from? Well, we are here in picturesque Cheshire, and 400 metres beneath our feet is an enormous slab of salt, and compressed air and water are being sent down. That gets pumped out, and so begins a long journey that tells you an awful lot about the cost of living crisis.
That brine is pumped under the ground in cast iron pipes along to here, British Salt in Middlewich. That's the salty water being filtered and purified in these big vats. Then it flows into here, these enormous evaporation vessels, where it's heated and heated and heated again. Eventually, you're left with this, pure dried vacuum salt. This will soon end up on your kitchen table and inside your body. But the point here is that making salt involves burning natural gas, and lots of it. Salt is, in part, a fossil fuel product, which helps explain why these prices are going up by 13% in the past year alone.
The process is massively energy intensive, so the evaporation process relies on a steam input that's derived from natural gas in the boiler process, typically demanding around 45 tonnes an hour of steam. In order to reduce that moisture content.
And so you're a big user of natural gas?
And natural gas is by far and away our biggest manufacturing cost.
You see, energy costs aren't just in energy. They're in salt, they're in basic materials, they're everywhere, coursing through supply chains like an economic shockwave. And this isn't the first time we've faced shockwaves like these.
When you get an intellectual mistake in policy and you allow inflation to start to rise, if you're then hit by bad luck, which is what happened in the 1970s and has happened now, it becomes something of a very unpleasant outcome. And it takes tough action, and it's not a pleasant period through which we're going to have to go.
An unpleasant period defined by higher prices, not just of salt, but other foods as well. But why are they going up? It couldn't be the same reason, could it? Cucumbers and tomatoes couldn't be fossil fuel products too, could they? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Here in the Lee Valley, they grow all those kinds of things under acres and acres of glass.
So in this block here, we're growing a cherry tomato, cherry on the vine. It's called Axiani. Yeah, so we've got the blocky peppers, the bell pepper, and some pointed peppers, and some snack peppers, little like baby peppers, sweet peppers.
Now, before we go any further, take a closer look at these pipes. They are what heat the greenhouse, keeping it at an optimal temperature for those tomatoes. And what heats the pipes? This hulking natural gas boiler. And the price of natural gas is up anywhere between 60% and 600% in the past year. But that's not all, because not only is the boiler heating the greenhouse, the CO2 from its chimneys is also being pumped into here to increase the rate of photosynthesis so the tomatoes grow faster. And there's more, because the fertiliser, those piles of bags waiting to be mixed and pumped into the greenhouse, is also made from natural gas. And fertiliser inflation, that's running at 47%. You see where we're heading here.
Obviously, gas has always been a big expense in a nursery this size, but in the last 6-9 months, it's been astronomical, really. The price increase that we've seen in the last 12 months has gone from, say, 40 pence per therm to we've seen £4. We've even hit £8 per therm on a day price.
And can you recall any time like it?
No. I don't think anybody has.
A little bit?
No, I mean, I've not seen, not to this extreme. There are others, they did not want to take the gamble that we took on planting. They left their glass house empty, they left their greenhouses empty, which, you know, if I look at it now, they've made a great decision. But
oh, really? Do you think it was the wrong decision to
as
keep
it's
going?
I can't tell. Until the end of the year comes, when we see what happens and what we've produced and if we get any help, I couldn't tell you if it's the right decision now.
Further down the valley of lush, verdant greenhouses, you see this white emptiness. For the first time in living memory, half the greenhouses here have been left fallow by growers who simply couldn't afford the energy costs. That brings us back to where we started. How significant a decision is it if you're a grower here, you know, taking that leap to leave this place empty?
Well, I mean, all of our growers are family businesses and they've been established here for 70 years. Some of them are third-generation growers from the same family. So it's a massive decision to stop growing because it feels as though you're letting down your heritage.
Often when we talk about a cost of living crisis, the images that go into your mind are supermarkets, prices, things like that. But actually, it's wider than that, because this is very economically destructive, because people simply can't do the work they want to do. That's what we're seeing here. It's not just a cost of living crisis, it's also a way of living crisis.
The reason for this is that energy is actually central to economic life. It's, in some sense, you know, economic activity is the deployment of energy to try to do more. And so when a shock happens in the energy sphere, then it necessarily has to run through the whole of the economy.
Back in Cheshire, the salt they make here doesn't just go into food. They use it to make soda ash, and that soda ash goes into this old plant, gets whizzed around in centrifuges, heated and dried in these pipes and cylinders, carbon dioxide is added, and you get sodium bicarbonate, baking soda. Biscuits, cakes, and a host of pharmaceuticals couldn't happen without this stuff.
Sodium bicarbonate, which has multiple uses, but particularly ones people may be familiar with, food in your kitchen, but perhaps less familiar, hemodialysis, which is key for kidney treatment, pharmaceuticals, so we have a product that can go into tablets as a pH buffer, detergents, even fire extinguishers.
But let's just pause again. You see those big towers behind Martin? That's a massive natural gas plant and a new carbon capture facility sending CO2 in to be used in their factories. Just like the greenhouse growing tomatoes, nothing here is wasted. Read between the lines and you see what's happening here. The price of salt, sodium bicarbonate and soda ash have a lot further to rise. The shockwave continues. Next stop, Nippon Electric Glass in Wigan. Here they make fiberglass, an extraordinary material, tiny strands of glass which will be woven into panels stronger than steel and incredibly light. But what's glass made from? Sand, a few other materials, and soda ash, the stuff they make in Cheshire. Those raw materials get loaded into this furnace and melted down.
1600 is the hottest spot, which is what we call crown temperature.
Crown temperature.
Which is one of the most important things that I do, is maintaining that crown.
You can actually smell the natural gas in the air as it gets piped into the furnace, and it is baking hot. And it has to be baking hot because if you want to turn sand into glass, you need to get up to temperatures of 1,500 degrees. There's a thermodynamic logic to this, and we have yet to come up with a better way, a more efficient way of doing it than with natural gas.
At the end of the furnace, the melted glass comes out as hair-thin strands. You can just about see them here. It's a surprisingly labour-intensive process. They call this milking the glass, which raises another issue. Energy and raw materials aren't the only thing getting more expensive, so too is human labour. For anyone hoping cheap wind power could help substitute for expensive gas, this place provides some challenges.
But you don't get fiberglass if you instantly get rid of natural gas.
No.
And you need fiberglass for the wind turbines that are going to help us get beyond natural gas.
Yes. Fiberglass at scale is a big process. It needs an awful lot of energy.
And this presumably is more expensive, just like just like your furnace. This is more expensive because your natural gas costs are higher.
Yes, and they've gone up significantly, even though we've protected ourselves with hedging, maybe up to 50% more than we were paying 12, 18 months ago.
By the way, that thing we're standing in front of is what dries the fiberglass, and only natural gas dryers cure it into the finished product.
When you have an increase in fossil fuel energy prices, particularly perhaps gas, then you make all the inputs for making the infrastructure for green energy more expensive too, because you can't produce solar panels or wind turbines at the moment without using fossil fuel energy.
At this stage, you're probably wondering, well, fair enough, what about the rest of the economy which doesn't make stuff? Well, that's affected too. For instance, the chemicals made from that salt also form the backbone of things like hair products, so this shockwave also travels down to your local hairdresser too.
We're affected, it's along the supply chain, so whether it's a raw material to go into a product or make a product package, we understand that they pass that on to the manufacturer, and they pass it on to the brand, whichever brand it happens to be, and we end up taking the brunt of that, and we have to make a decision: do we put our prices up? We've had a saying for a long time: better off to have some cake than no cake.
All of which is why inflation in this part of the services sector is running at 5.5%. Energy prices sparking a raw materials crisis and a cost of living nightmare. But there's one final question. Where did this shockwave actually begin? Think about it, gas prices were at record highs before Russia invaded Ukraine. What if these shockwaves were amplified by central banks, including the Bank of England, printing hundreds of billions of pounds to pump into the economy?
They shouldn't have been printing the extra money. What governments were doing was enough to deal with the consequences of COVID.
And that, your point is, that has contributed to what we're now seeing in terms of the cost of living.
Yes, and it's true. You can see it with all central banks, that they're now worried about inflation when they weren't before. And it's not all the result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And this was foreseeable, you think?
Yes, it was foreseeable, because it was a mistaken diagnosis of what needed to be done with the pandemic.
Whatever the cause, it's now clear what we're facing. Shockwave after shockwave, prices spiralling higher, coming your way down these supply chains, the very foundation of the 21st century economy. Not just an energy crisis, an everything crisis. It is only just beginning.